Welcome to the Better Birth podcast. I'm really excited today to be talking to Laura from Plus Size Pregnancy, and we're going to be talking about plus size pregnancies. Hi, Laura.
Hiya, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Do you want to introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yes, so like we said, hi, I'm Laura from Plus Size Pregnancy. I started Plus Size Pregnancy in January of this year after I did have a different business before, well, a different hypnobirthing business before, but I didn't feel like it was authentically me, I suppose. And I decided to rebrand as Plus Size Pregnancy to give more support to plus size pregnant people, because when I was pregnant, especially the second time, I was more plus size than I was the first time. I feel like there isn't much support or representation out there. And we're told a lot of things as plus size pregnant people that aren't true, unfortunately. So I wanted to start a page and I wanted to rebrand my business to support plus size pregnant people and get the real information out there for them.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So yeah, here we are today.
I think it's really good that there's somebody like you kind of focusing on a specific audience, because I mean, as hypnobirthing instructors, obviously we have a broad knowledge of lots of different things, and we give advice on all different aspects of birth and eventualities. But I think you're right, it is nice, it's good, it's important for certain demographics to be able to have someone who's knowledgeable in that demographic and the implications that can have on their birth. So what are the kind of typical things that people come up against if they are plus size and they're pregnant? Because it does influence, or it can affect their choices, can't it?
Definitely. Well, from the very beginning, from when you first have your booking in appointment, when you first go and see the midwife, right at the very beginning of your pregnancy, from then onwards, it can have an impact. So they ask you if you can be weighed. Well, they tell you generally they need to weigh you, but obviously you can say no. And as soon as they've worked out your BMI, that's it, you're labelled. Yeah. If your BMI is over 30, you're labelled as, being a plus size person or having a raised BMI, and therefore straight away they say they want to book you in for a gestational diabetes test. Straight away they tell you they want to book you in for additional growth scans because you're bound to have a big baby, which isn't true, but that's something they straight away make an assumption that that's going to happen. And then from there you might be consultant led. So there's lots of different things right from that first appointment that can completely change the course of your care after that point. So then obviously you have to see midwives and consultants, and like just so many different things in your care are changed. And yes, a lot of people are told they can't do things, you're not allowed to do things, or you must do this, which again isn't true. You always have the final say regardless of your BMI.
Yeah, which is true about anything, for anybody, isn't it? Anybody that's pregnant, you can say no to anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Regardless of what you're told. So if I was a plus size pregnant person, and I booked in, and I had a certain set idea of the kind of birth that I wanted, say for example a water birth on the birth centre, what kind of objections or what kind of discussions would I end up likely to be having with the midwife?
So we generally always say as hypnobirthing instructors, you can have the birth that you want. You have the right to the birth that you want. However, birth centres are allowed to say no. They're allowed to say, oh, we have a policy in place where if you've got a BMI over normally 35 seems to be the cutoff for most birth centres, but obviously that can differ from each place because, well, it's a policy. They can do what they like. So you may even just be told no. You can't have a birth in a birth centre, and they are allowed to, unfortunately, say no. So then home birth or labour ward are your different options, really. If you want a water birth, that's a whole different thing as well. Again, you can have a water birth. You can have a water birth at home, labour ward, wherever, but they like to say, no, because of your BMI, you're not allowed a water birth. And when I wrote a post about it on Instagram and I was researching it, there's not really any information out there explaining exactly why you're not allowed to water birth because of your BMI. It's just assumptions being made about bigger bodies, assumptions that they won't be able to get you out, even though according to I think it's RCOG guidelines, they should have equipment in place that can remove someone that weighs up to like 500 kilos or something. So a massive, massive amount. So there should be equipment in place to get you out, regardless of your size. But also it's making an assumption that you won't be able to get yourself out. So as if like, if your body's big, you're weak, which obviously doesn't work out, because, you know, you could be thinner or, you know, have a very low BMI and not be able to get yourself out. Should everyone have to do a test to practice getting in and out of water? It's ridiculous. And there's also another assumption that they won't be able to monitor the baby. But why is there an assumption that they will need to monitor the baby? It's almost like, oh, there's going to be problems because you're bigger, so we will need continuous monitoring, which again isn't true. So yeah, the information out there for water birth is really ridiculous, because there isn't really any. And things should be in place to monitor your baby if you are in the water, and to get you out if you're on the water. So for anybody of any size, it should be the same thing.
Yeah, I think I've written posts about water birth for high BMI myself, because I had a client who was told they couldn't have a water birth. And yeah, some of the things that people get told, they are complete misconceptions about the risks, or about, you know, plus size pregnant people. And it's really wrong, because it's taking away choices from people who should be able to have the same kind of birth as everybody else. And it's shocking that guidelines and policies are based on fallacies, really. But unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Like, I've had lots of people who say to me, or that have messaged me, or, you know, spoken to me all about how they've been told no. And then it's just about, well, the unfortunate thing is people are told no, they're like, oh, okay then, because they don't know. They think that that's it, you know, a doctor's word, or, you know, midwife's word, or any healthcare professional, their word should be, you know, gospel. It should be something that you can absolutely trust and believe in. But unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. So just knowing that you can say, well, wait a minute, this is the information that I know, why? So give me the evidence that says why I cannot, or why that's a problem. And generally, they can't, because there isn't any. So yeah, just knowing that you can fight your corner is really important.
That's not individualized care, though, is it? Blanket,
no, not at all.
BMI is over a certain number, and therefore you can't do X, Y, Z, doesn't take into account, you know, a whole host of other, you know, factors to do with your health and your medical history. So if you are told no, what can you do? I mean, who should they be speaking to kind of push further and you know, further that conversation?
Straight away, I would recommend speaking to either the lead consultant or the lead midwife, or both. Mm-hmm. Because, you know, they're the people that are in charge of the place, and they're the people who you should be able to say to, look, I am healthy, I am mobile, I am able to do this, that, and the other. Please explain to me why I'm not able to birth in water.
Yeah.
Now, there's no reason, like, they won't be able to give you a reason, because at the end of the day, only you know what it feels like to live inside your body. You know what your strength is, you know how you feel, you know what you're capable of. They don't, based on numbers on a piece of paper. They don't really know anything about you. And also, BMI is crap. It's not a measurement of health or strength. It's just a measurement, like, you know, worked out with your height and your weight. It doesn't mean anything. Even the guy that came up with it, who was a mathematician, even said it should not be used in this way that we are using it today. So it's really, you know, it's ridiculous. It needs to be gotten out of healthcare altogether, really.
I think it's interesting, because you're right when you said that, you know, a lot of us, when we get told something by a medical professional, we do kind of take it at face value and go, oh, okay, and then don't question it. But I have had clients who have been told something which would have influenced, for example, them giving birth on the birth centre, and just simply asking a question, well, can I do this? Or can you give me the reason for that? And that's all it took. And then the consultant went, yeah, that's fine. We can do that. And if they hadn't have asked the question, they wouldn't have got the birth centre birth that they wanted. So it's not always a case of having to, go to battle and have to have this really, fired up conversation to get the birth that you want. Sometimes it is just simply asking the question, well, can we do this? What are the alternatives? And working that out. So what if you get a point blank, no, we are not willing to support you to give birth on the birth centre, then what are their options then as alternatives?
You can always go elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because first of all, again, like policies differ from place to place. One place may say outright no. Another place may be more willing to have a conversation with you and to, discuss risks, benefits, things like that, who may actually be willing to have a conversation with you rather than being like really hardline with their policies. So you can just go to anywhere else, like how you can change your consultant, you can change your midwife, you can change your provider altogether, go elsewhere, find another place nearby, or even things like think, what is it about a birth centre that you really want? Do you want the relaxed atmosphere? Do you want to feel comfortable? Or do you want to just be with midwives? Then perhaps home birth is another option. So there are, different things that you can do to get the birth that you want and the kind of atmosphere that you want when you are giving birth.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I do tell my clients. If they, if for whatever reason, for example, they end up on labour ward and they wanted a birth centre birth, for example, you do still have control over that environment. You can still make
of course
environment, but obviously, if you have your heart set on a particular type of birth, then you should definitely be able to push for that and not have your options taken away. Home birth is a fantastic option for lots and lots of people, and I think it's massively underutilized. So if you are plus sized, do people tend to come up against objections for home birth from the hospital?
Yeah, that's another issue as well. Straight away, you can be told, oh no, you're not allowed a home birth. Of course, everybody can have a home birth. Everyone can. It's the case of don't get in the car. No one's going to come to your house banging on your door saying, oh, someone told me you're in labour, you need to get to the hospital. No one can make you leave your house. So yeah, I have had a few people that go, or they have to have a meeting with the home birth team to see if the home birth team will allow it. Things like that. It's just a bit, so then you feel like you need to be permitted to do it. Otherwise, what will you be denied care because you've got a higher BMI and the team don't want to support you? So, regardless of your BMI, you are worthy of care. You are worthy of, a good standard of care. You are worthy of equal care to anyone of any other size. But people are made to feel as though they're not worthy of that care.
And you can't be denied care.
No.
I mean, regardless of your BMI, if you go into labour at home, they have a duty of care to send somebody to you, whether that's
absolutely
or paramedic. A healthcare professional would be sent to you if you were giving birth at home, regardless if you planned it or not.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's always an option. And again, if they're saying you can't have a birth pool, you can have a birth pool at home. It's your home. And it's a great form of pain relief because bigger people, we're all so heavy. So the water relieves that, doesn't it? It helps us be a bit more buoyant. So it's a brilliant form of pain relief for anybody of any size. So really, you would have thought they'd be pushing people to have water births because it makes you, lighter.
Yeah. Some of the reasons that I've heard people denied home births because of their high BMI are mental. I mean, genuinely really stupid. Like there was a discussion on Facebook. I can't remember whose Facebook post it was, but there was a discussion around people who have high BMI and they were denied a home water birth because one person said the midwife said because they would need to, if they couldn't get them out of the pool, they would need to stab the birth pool with a knife to deflate it. And then do you want to have a whole birth pool's worth of water all over your front room? Which is crazy.
If I couldn't get out, then flood my bed, flood my living room. It's so stupid.
stupid. And there was a whole debate underneath that comment of some midwives saying that that's ridiculous, like that would never happen. And there are the birth pools are in rings, so you deflate the top ring first anyway,
Yeah,
to lower the level to get the person out. You'd raise the water level up so that they're buoyant, because we float regardless of how big
yeah,
we are, and then you deflate the top ring to get them out. And then there was other midwives who said, there was one or two actually that did say, no, I've heard that policy. So it's a genuine, I mean, it's obviously not a very common one, but we do get told these weird, ridiculous things. And if you didn't know any better, you would just go, okay, well, I guess I can't have what I want then.
yeah,
And all of
yeah.
these little decisions that get made for you, I'm doing like air quotes because they're not really being made for you, because you do obviously, like you said, you do have control, right? But all of these decisions that get made for you can have potentially a negative impact on the rest of your birth, right?
Definitely, because if from day one, when you meet your the first healthcare professional you meet during your pregnancy, so usually a midwife, you're told this, that, and the other. You can't do this, you can't do this, you must do that, you must do that. It's almost implying that it's dangerous for a plus size pregnant person to go through pregnancy and to go through birth. Like I even had one person, this is really awful, who said to me that after their booking in appointment, it was so awful. They felt like they wanted to end their pregnancy because they felt like they weren't going to make it to the end anyway, because of how they were spoken to by a healthcare professional about their BMI over and over and over again. It's just like, my goodness, like that's an awful way to make somebody feel just because of their BMI, which again, BMI is crap. It doesn't measure anything. But that person was made to feel so awful from that first appointment. So again, it like puts a lot of fear in a lot of people. And then obviously we know that fear creates tension, creates pain, and that can make birth, far more difficult than it need be if we were, looked after by people who made us feel confident and powerful and like, yeah, we can do it. Like, forget our BMI, we can do it. Our bodies are absolutely capable of birthing our babies. But unfortunately, those people seem to be few and far between for people with a high BMI.
So, I mean, you mentioned like this idea that being a higher BMI, is risky. I mean, is there genuine risk with being a higher BMI and an impact on labour and baby?
When you read statistics, it's so like minimal, the increased risks. Like there's a lot of talk, again, you might be told by healthcare professionals, oh, there's an increased risk of stillbirth, there's an increased risk of shoulder dystocia because of the increased risk of gestational diabetes. But again, when you read the statistics about things like, so gestational diabetes, I think it's only like a 5% higher risk than there is for anybody else. And it's generally got nothing to do with your BMI in general. Like it's, genetics, it's loads of different things that can, cause gestational diabetes. I only know one person that's had it. She lives upstairs actually, and she worked in a gym. So like really fit, really healthy, really, probably went into her booking in meeting as the ideal birthing person, got gestational diabetes. So it's, it can happen to anybody. Again, with shoulder dystocia, again, like they're told like your babies are going to be big because you're big, but when you read statistics, it's like 1% difference, and it doesn't seem to be accurate information at all. So although there are some like tiny increases in some risks, they're tiny. So it doesn't really, it's up to you what is a big enough risk for it to actually be a risk.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. So yeah, there's a lot of talk of risk, but it seems to just be a lot of talk rather than being actual risk.
I think that's quite common across the board, not just with being high BMI, but generally when risk is referred to. I think it's so important to ask for the research and ask for the actual stats, because if somebody says to you, like for example, if your waters rupture at term and your contractions don't start, and they start asking, they start pressurizing you to be induced, and they say the risk of stillbirth doubles if you don't go into labor within 24 hours. Well, that may be true, but doubling from what to what? Because if it's
exactly
something percent to 0. No, I can't remember the stats were, but like say 0.2% to 0.4%, for example, there's still really tiny risk, so the way stats are presented to you, or the lack of the actual hard facts can be really misleading, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Because again, there's increased risk of shoulder dystocia. I mean, big baby seems to be a hot topic at the moment. Everyone, regardless of your size, seems to be getting told they're going to have a big baby. But the risk, I'm pretty sure it's 51% of babies that go through shoulder dystocia when they're being born are for people with a high BMI, and 49% aren't. So it doesn't seem to really matter because it's the same, almost the same percentage, regardless of. Oh no, it's not with people with a high BMI. It's big babies. So regardless of the size of the baby, it doesn't seem to make a difference.
Yeah.
But or the difference is so small. Why is it even being talked about as a risk when it's such a tiny amount?
Yeah.
This is fear-mongering.
Recently, who've been told either they've got a really small baby or they're having a really big baby. And I read some research that Kemi Johnson posted on Instagram yesterday. And the research study looked at big babies, people who half the sample size, they had been identified as having a big baby, and the other half had a big baby, but it wasn't identified before the baby was born. And they looked at the outcomes for the babies and the instances of shoulder dystocia, and there was no difference.
No difference. It's so stupid.
It didn't. I don't identifying that you had a really big baby didn't change the rates of shoulder dystocia, but it massively increased the amount of medical intervention and C-section. So it's crazy.
Because of mostly probably because those people have been told, oh, you're going to have a big baby, you're going to have a big baby, oh, your baby's going to be massive, huge, how's it going to get out? So obviously then they're terrified. So again, that impacts labor. It impacts the whole process of birth, being stressed or scared or, anything negative really, because, again, fear, tension, pain, and slowing everything down, and then more intervention. So I'm not surprised, unfortunately, I'm not surprised.
And she did a poll on her Instagram as well, asking those of you who did get told you had a really small baby or a large baby, were they actually really small or really large when they were born? I think pretty much across the board, everyone was like, baby was 7 pounds, 8 pounds. I mean, I don't think there was any, maybe one or two, but I don't think there was really anybody who got told they were having like a massive baby, that actually did have a massive baby. I think there was one person, she had a 10-pound baby, but she gave birth to it fine. There was no problem, because
that's it as well. We're made to think that even if we are actually going to have a big baby, we're made to feel like we can't give birth to that big baby, even though yes, we can. Your body is capable of giving birth to a big baby. My plus size aunt gave birth to, I think it was a 12-pound baby, really big baby, but she had a vaginal birth. She's plus size, he was massive. So we are capable.
It's just genetics, isn't it? A lot of the time, because this is another thing that doesn't get taken into account. If you've got a really high BMI, and your baby's measuring big, for example, well, but how tall are you? How big were you when you were born? How big was your mum? How big was your grandmother? All of these things. If there's a trend, going back into your family history of you're all 6 foot tall and you all have really big babies, then of course your baby's going to be big, potentially, because it's genetic. But you're designed to give birth to that big baby.
Yeah, exactly. You should be genetically designed to get the baby out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting, and the trends that we're all seeing as birth workers now, the rates of medicalization And I said to you before we started recording, I'd bring up the NICE guidelines, the proposed changes to induction of labour. And anyway, if anyone doesn't know what I'm talking about, but essentially the National Institute of Clinical Excellence are the body that advises NHS and produces guidelines that the NHS and maternity would be following, have proposed to change their recommendations for induction of labour. And there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of pushback in terms of what they're proposing. And one of those guidelines is to offer or recommend induction for anybody over a certain BMI and to induce them at 39 weeks. So that can have huge implications for anybody with a higher BMI, right?
Exactly. Again, right from the beginning, people probably, if that does go ahead, which obviously we generally hope that it won't. Again, right from the beginning, people are going to feel like their bodies aren't capable of birthing their babies on their own. And people are going to feel stressed. People are going to think like, okay, what can I do to get this baby out by 39 weeks so I don't have to be induced? So again, yeah, it's making people believe that your plus size pregnant body isn't capable of doing things without help, isn't capable of doing things without this intervention. Like, again, obviously, even if it does get put in as a guideline, again, you can say no. But like we said, if people are told something by a healthcare professional, unless they know better, so unless they've found, somewhere that educates them in a way that they know they can say no, they're going to say yes. And we know that there's, a lot of issues with induction with regards to the cascade of intervention.
Yeah.
They're going to mean, one thing after another and increase the rates of lots of things that you don't want it to increase, like cesarean. So yeah, it's ridiculous. Again, it's based on assumptions about plus size pregnant bodies. It's essentially it's institutional fat phobia.
Yes.
It's with like the NHS is fat phobic. All these policies we've been speaking about are based on assumptions about bigger bodies, therefore they're fat phobic. It's like, and this guideline is also fat phobic. It's basically, rather than dealing with the fat phobia and along with all the racism and ageism and all the other things that are within that guideline that they want to introduce, instead of dealing with the problem of the fat phobia, they've just been like, I'll just get the babies out of them sooner then. So to me, it just seems really ridiculous, really, really ridiculous. And I really hope it doesn't happen, because I think it's going to cause a lot of problems long term.
Scary though, because that, like you said, that cascade of intervention, the potential impact that could have on thousands, millions of people's births isn't just about your experience of birth. That can have long-lasting health implications for your child as well. We know that the implications or the potential knock-on effects of, say, for example, C-section for a child. That recent research study that came out by Hannah Dahlen proves that there are higher rates of respiratory disease, asthma, eczema, allergies and food intolerances in babies who are born by C-section, because they miss out on that vital dose of bacteria when they're born vaginal. That's that, and things, these implications are not explained at all. They're not even mentioned. You might get midwife quite often say, we'll just book you in for an induction at 41 weeks, just in case you get to that point. At least we know it's in the diary. And there's no real, you might get given a flyer, which may or may not cover some of the risks of induction, but the real long-lasting potential impacts of these medical interventions aren't discussed. And I think people are blindly accepting potentially damaging medical interventions. I'm not saying that, like, induction is the devil and there is no place for it. Of course there is. But I think what you and I are saying is that a lot of people who potentially didn't need to have an induction may end up going down this induction route, and that could have negative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, the effect on mental health, I think, would be enormous, because like we know that like sorry if this is like triggering in any way for anybody, but in the first year after giving birth, the highest cause of death is suicide. So with more inductions, it will possibly lead to more birth trauma because of things like the cascade of intervention. Therefore, it will lead to more mental health and like postnatal depression, things like that. So will it ultimately lead to more death, but in a different way to what they're trying to prevent through this? So instead of it being death during labour or shortly after, which again is extremely rare, giving birth is safe, but they're trying to make it, or trying to like almost put this, you know, a plaster over the problem with this, let's do an induction early. So instead of, you know, deaths during that, will it just be postnatal deaths instead? Because of the trauma that could be caused, like, you know, births that are traumatic, that don't go anywhere near to plan, like it is traumatic for people. So it's almost like they're trying to solve one problem but creating another massive problem.
Yeah,
it's just really, really, I think it's really ridiculous. Whoever came up with the idea clearly doesn't know what they're doing. But I think plain and simple, they don't know what they're doing. They don't really know about that, what the actual issue is, or they genuinely just don't want to deal with the actual problem, which is institutional racism, fatphobia, ageism, ableism, like all of that in the NHS.
yeah, because that guideline, I mean, it is like a blanket statement for, and it is mind-boggling, because if you read it, I mean, you're right, because when you're going through all of those different isms, you know, it is if your BMI is over a certain level, or if you fit a demographic of a certain ethnic minority, if you're Asian or Black, if you are over 35, which is like a hell of a lot of people, because not, you know, the trends for people getting pregnant, you know, is getting older and older, because we're waiting longer to have our babies. So, you know, I mean, I would tick several of those boxes already, because I'm too old apparently, and I'm an ethnic minority that puts me in high risk. Again, I'm doing like air quotes. I would absolutely be told to be induced at 39 weeks. It's mental, because the amount of people it's going to affect is huge. Really, really.
Yeah, I think there just needs to be a massive, there needs to be education in the NHS. There needs to be like a bit of a, like, what was such a shame reading that guideline at the time was, oh, this was such a good opportunity for actual real change to attitudes from people who work within the NHS. It could have been a brilliant opportunity to really throw some education out there, people really look at the problems, really like dissect the problems and start doing the work to make things better for everybody, not just for, you know, white, slim, cis, heterosexual people. Is, you know, slim. It should be for, you know, they really could have used this as an opportunity for massive, positive, brilliant changes. And instead, it was just like, no, induce for 39 weeks.
Stick a plaster on it.
Yeah, it just like such a, like, that's what like really wound me up, because it was an opportunity for great change. And instead, they're just like, nah, let's just do this instead. That's better.
So
yeah.
I mean, we can't, I mean, I say we can't change things, but we can, because I wrote and I signed a petition and everything else. But aside from, you know, campaigning against these changes, and aside from trying to get, you know, guidelines changed, what would you recommend as a plus size pregnant person? What should they be doing to kind of prepare and educate themselves so that they do have the best possible birth?
Ideally, my course. Yeah, my course. I have a very hypnobirthing course, plus size friendly. But yeah, actually, the whole first session of my course is all about self-advocacy and your rights. Yeah. Because from the second you start a course with me, essentially, well, obviously with anybody, you cover that stuff anyway, but this is like literally a whole 3-hour session on it. You just knowing your rights and knowing how to advocate for yourself, I think is so important. Knowing that you do not have to just smile and nod and do as you're told, knowing that you have options, knowing you can say no, knowing how to advocate for yourself with confidence in your appointments, I think is so important, just so that you don't leave your appointments feeling powerless, feeling like you have no rights left, feeling like, oh my God, because I'm in the body that I live in, I can't do anything, even though my, you know, skinny friend can do, you know, doing what they like. No, 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 no. You can also get what you want. You can get the birth that you want. You, unfortunately, you may have to just ask more questions. You may have to have a little bit of a fight sometimes, depending on your care providers. You may just have to push a little harder for things. But knowing that you can do that because it's your right to be able to do that, I think is so important, just so that you can protect yourself and not take anyone's shit, basically.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you say, oh, every course to do that, but and I think they probably all do. I mean, mine does to a certain extent. When we spend time talking about rights and things, but I think for somebody who is plus size, it warrants that 3-hour session. And I don't know about you, but I mean, I think in general, this is a big generalization, but as British people, we like to be polite. We don't like to make a fuss. You know, we don't like to send a dish back in the restaurant. You know, we don't like to offend people. We're all too nice, and that filters into everything, doesn't it? And when you go into hospital, you know, I say to my clients, if you're not happy with your care, or you're not happy with the way something's been explained to you, you don't understand, ask for somebody else. And it seems like such a simple thing to say, but it's not something we instinctively do, I think, or feel comfortable doing. So I think spending a lot of time on advocacy, particularly if it's something that you are going to probably have to do and you're going to be confronted with, is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And even like with birth partners, knowing that birth partners can also advocate for you, and it's an incredibly important part of their role. Like in my July course just gone, I was talking to the birth partners last week and just saying, you know, like, look, if for any reason whatsoever neither of you like the midwife, or like for whatever reason, it doesn't matter, even if it's just you don't like her face and it's making you feel uncomfortable, like literally any reason at all, you don't like them, ask for a different one. Because you need to feel comfortable. You should feel comfortable and confident in the care that you're being given. Like I said earlier, you're worthy of care. You're worthy of good quality care, regardless of who you are, what your size is, whatever. You should be feeling as though you are cared for. So yeah, advocacy is so important. Self-advocacy, birth partners knowing how to advocate for you too when you're in labour and you're in your zone, and you shouldn't have to advocate for yourself at that moment. Somewhat having people there, whether it's doula, birth partners, whoever, having an advocate.
Yeah, and I think it's so important that birth partners, regardless of, you know, your circumstances, I think anybody is going into labour, anyone who's going to have a birth partner there needs to do the course, whatever course you're doing. It's really important that birth partners attend the course, because if your birth partner's clueless and they don't know what your birth preferences are, or, which is quite common, I think, you know, the person who's pregnant goes away and does all of the birth preferences and does the research and then goes to the birth partner, here's my birth plan, read it. And then you're expected to advocate that birth plan and that person's preferences without really understanding why they've chosen X, Y, Z. It can be really hard, or it's a possible task, really, isn't it? So the more prepared the birth partners are, and the more confident they are, and the more they know in terms of advocacy and, you know, actual, you know, antenatal education, you know, what happens in birth and what all the different interventions are and the pros and cons and everything, the better, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I think, yeah, everyone in that birth room should be as educated as possible about all the options. So again, yeah, so they are able to advocate for you when you're, you know, trying to get a baby out. Like at that moment in time, you're busy. And you mentioned birth plans. Like whenever I see a post saying that a birth plan's a waste of time, it all goes out the window anyway, it really, really, really winds me up massive amounts, because the purpose of a birth plan isn't to predict the future and say, this is how my baby's going to pop out of my fanny. It's the process that is so important, because that's where you're getting educated. So I always recommend doing like 3 birth plans at least. So your ideal, your, you know, say if there is some kind of intervention, or there's change of plan, or you have to give birth somewhere else for some reason, and a possible cesarean. So then at least for whatever happens, you should feel really informed, and you know what your choices are and what your options are for whatever, like whichever comes up. So the process of planning is a process of learning. Therefore, it's a bloody brilliant process you should be wanting to do. Not just like, I was going to go out the window anyway, so fuck it. No, no, those posts really irritate me.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a really common thing. I mean, I think people will think that if you do your birth plan, you're like, right, I want to have a home water birth with no drugs. And that's fine. If that's what you want to aim for, that's fantastic. But you don't just then go and write on your plan, this is what I want. You know, you need to understand, but if labour stalls and they offer me artificial oxytocin, or if you know, I don't know, you know, all sorts of different things, or I decide that I want drugs, for example, or whatever happens, or it turns out we need to have an instrumental delivery, or they recommend that actually we think we need to wheel you into theatre for C-section. If you haven't prepared for any of those, and you only are prepared for a home water birth, and you don't end up with that home water, of course you're going to feel really defeated and negative about it. You're right, it's the process of researching all those options, understanding all the different eventualities. Yes, you can still aim for that home water birth, but you need to be educated about everything else that could happen. And C-section,
yeah, absolutely.
like if you haven't, I think lots of people, again, like they have this misconception that if you have a C-section, it's like we'll just throw everything out the window. Like that's it, like it's over. It's the worst thing in the world, and you know, I've got no control. And of course you have control if you have a C-section. You know, you and I both know that you can ask for a whole load of things with a C-section.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you haven't asked for them, so you need to know what the things are you can ask for to be able to get them in the first place.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, like you said, just knowing, I think being as informed as possible about any eventuality means that you are mentally prepared for it. And I think, again, I say if you were suddenly told, oh, you need, like, you know, we need to, you know, use forceps, and you don't have any idea what forceps are, you don't have any idea what the process of using forceps is, you don't know why they're being used. If you know nothing about that, that might be really like horrible for you. Whereas if you're like, oh, okay, because you know it all already, you know ways to help you relax, you know what, like, you know your breathing techniques so that you, well, whatever happens, you can stay calm, relaxed, positive throughout. You know, all of that helps you, you know, with the final result and how you feel about how you give birth, because ultimately that's really important. How you feel about how your birth went is what will keep you going afterwards. That's, you know, regardless of how your baby comes into the world, how you feel about they came into the world, feeling powerful, feeling like you're in control, feeling informed about the choices that you made throughout is what will, you know, make however it happens a positive experience.
Yeah, and that's the running theme across all of the birth stories on my podcast. They're positive, not because of where they gave birth, not because of how they gave birth. It's the fact that they felt in control of the situation, and being informed and educated goes a long, long way to you feeling like you're in control of the situation. So if anyone's listening, please do a course. I don't even care if you don't do it with me. I just want you to do a course, because I genuinely, hand on heart, just wish everybody would educate themselves so that they understood their rights and they understood their options, because there would be so many people having much more positive births if they did.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, don't care who you do a course with, just do a good course from a reliable source. So like even doing things like, before you pick a course, don't just pick one out of the air. Follow that person on Instagram for a while. Does that person fit with you? Do you feel like you could trust this person, the information they're giving you? Things like that. Because there's loads of hypnobirthing instructors out there. Some of them are shit. some of them give the wrong information. Some of them have like a different, you know, there's, you know, not every hypnobirthing course is the same. So make sure they're on the same wavelength as you. Make sure you feel comfortable with them. You know, like, do their posts leave you feeling inspired and leave you feeling really, you know, like you've got some information already and you want a little bit more by doing their course? You know, find the goodies.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, even though there's a lot of hypnobirthing instructors, we should all be wonderful. Like with any job, there are some people that are great and some people that are shit. So find the goodies. There's a lot of goodies, but make sure you're with a goodie.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to do a course with you, where do they go? How do they book you?
At the moment, so with my previous business, at that time I had some more money, so I just said to a guy, make me a website. This time around, I don't have money because I've been having children, so I haven't been working as much. And I tried to make my own website, and it turns out I'm really, really crap with computers. So I don't have a website right now, but you can just message me on Instagram or email me at plussizehypnobirthing@gmail.com, and you can, talk to me about booking a course. I'm hopefully going to find someone who can make me a website fairly cheap. Or if you're a plus size pregnant person who can make websites, we can come to a deal. That would be really, really helpful. So yeah, just message me, get in touch, and I'll send you an email with information of how to book a course. But yeah, it's 10 hours of plus size friendly education with me, including all hypnobirthing stuff as well. You also get my ongoing support. I've been doing one-to-one sessions with each of my clients so far, so they generally all choose to do a birth planning session. So it's been me, them, and their birth partner. It's all online. So yeah, you've got 10 hours of education plus me until you want to get rid of me, really. So if you ever need me, I'm around for you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for chatting to me today. I think it's been really, really, really useful, and I'll make sure I tag your Instagram in the bio of the podcast episode, so if anyone needs to find you, they can do.
Lovely. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care.
Thanks, you too. Bye.